This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Zinzi Clemmons' beautiful book, What We Lose, came out in 2017, just a few months after I lost my mom to cancer. Zinzi's story about losing her mother to cancer was a great help during my grief process. Because reading it, I felt Zinzi holding my hand, telling me, I know exactly how you feel, and I know you can do this. So instead of a big introduction, I'd like to share with you two of my favorite passages from What We Lose. I am most troubled when my mother is very present to me, when I dream of her extra vividly and can hear her voice. Even when I wake up, I'm left with the eerie sensation of how I used to feel, scared, loving, and small in comparison in her presence. In these moments, I feel that she's still alive and I'm talking to her in my mind. But now she cannot answer back. I feel that I have some kind of beautiful secret. I love this new magical mom who is always watching over me, whose counsel I can seek in an instant, whose advice frequently matches my own wishes and desires. I don't know how to place this new mother, my dead mother, with a mother who was alive. When I look at her grave, I feel it the most. How can she be there when she is still here, inside me? My mother is dead, but I still see her, but I still feel her. I can still hear her voice, even right now as I am speaking to you. But she's dead. When I look at this picture of her at the beach, I can feel the sun on my skin. I can hear the way she spoke to me. But she's gone. I can dream her and I can hear her cry. She tells me what happened that day and she cries with me. She tells me not to be afraid, but she's dead. A part of her is still alive in me, but she is gone. She will live forever in heaven, but she is not on earth. Parts of her will live on in the trees and the streams and the birds of tomorrow. She is the water and the plants and the bits of dust I see swirl in columns of light, but she is dead. If I look long enough at a flower, I can see the color of her cheeks in the stigma. But she is not here. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Zinzi Clemmons. Zinzi is an American award-winning writer whose debut novel, What We Lose, came out in 2017 and was widely praised by US media and literary critics, and one of my favorite books ever. I was just telling Zinzi. Her next book, Freedom, is coming out in May, in just a couple of months. It's a mix of memoir, family history, criticism, and reportage exploring race, sex, class, and inheritance. And I read somewhere, Zinzi, I don't know where anymore, but I read Freedom was an effort to write about the aftermath of What We Lose in nonfiction. And in my opinion, a very successful effort. I loved how the two books connect, and we'll talk about them. Zinzi, hello and welcome.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here with you, Anna.
I'm very excited because I just told you quickly, I read What We Lose, which is a lot. It's not only, but it's about losing your mother, or it's based on your experience with losing your mother. It came out in 2017. I lost my mom in 2016. And your book touched me so deeply. It was really a very important support and company in my grief. And I just reread it again, and I loved it just as much as I loved it the first time. I really love the book. I love the style. I love the vignettes. I love the mix of all the different forms and styles, and just feel the experience. I mean, I so share it and felt the same way losing my mom. So I find myself in it, and yet again for the second time around reading it. So thank you now publicly for writing such a beautiful book. Will you tell me about it? Maybe you can start just by telling us how you became a writer, and then we'll talk about the two books and how they complement each other.
First, thank you so much for all of your kind words about What We Lose. It's been, almost a decade since that book came out, and it's so wonderful to hear that it made a difference to people. One of my goals as a writer has always been to kind of make a difference in the world, and one of the impacts that I hope that book would have would be just that, to be able to speak to people in that same situation, to be able to kind of process and intellectualize grief to a certain extent in order to, connect us in the end. And so it's wonderful to hear that, and I'm glad that it could be helpful to you. And to answer your question, I wasn't one of those children who always wanted to be a writer. I started out a little differently to a lot of my peers, I think. At least, from the stories that I've heard. I always read a lot as a child, but I never really had the idea that writing was something that I could do. That I felt empowered to do until I was in college. I had always been creative, and I had these two kind of parallel, at times competing drives. One was towards science, and the other was towards more visual expression. So when I was in grade school, I took a lot of science classes, as many as I could, and I really loved biology. And at the same time, I took a lot of visual arts classes, and I always really felt at home there. I always felt accepted there. I wasn't someone who felt accepted really anywhere. And so that was very important and enriching. And when I got to college, I intended to become a pre-med, and I found myself in these lab courses and just completely alienated, and I just really struggled with it. I just didn't feel connected to it. I felt bored. I also took some visual arts courses, and I just happened to sign up for an intro to creative writing course. And there was something like alchemical that happened. It's an experience that I still kind of draw on to this day in my work as a professor, where, both of us teach creative writing. And I sat down to write. I can still remember my first assignment, where it was just me and a blank page, and it was so exciting to me that I got to have the space all to myself to do with whatever I wanted. And I had never done that before. I had journaled quite a lot, but I had never written something with the intention to share it. And it was easy, and it was fun, and it just felt natural. And I just felt at home. And from there, I just, kept doing it. And here I am.
I keep nodding and nodding at you, Zinzi, because that was my experience. I never ever thought that I would be a writer. That was never even, I never even like had nothing to do with it, and graduated from university with an MBA and started a corporate career, which I worked in for a long, long time. And I accidentally started writing, literally. And I remember because I journal like you do, but I love writing with a fountain pen. And I so remember the first drop, like the first letter I wrote of what became my first book with the fountain pen, I remember the shine on the wet ink, and I started writing and I never stopped. It was so I absolutely feel what you just described. How did What We Lose happen? How did the first book happen?
So What We Lose actually started. It didn't start when I sat down to write a book called What We Lose, as is true of a lot of projects,
they
and
don't.
especially exactly. Yeah, it started far in advance of what I thought I would write a novel. I had actually just I had been writing about my mom for a long time. When I started my grad program, those are the stories that came out. And What We Lose is it's sort of based on my own life and my own experience. And my mom, the character in the book, is based on her. And she was a character, as I say, I think in Freedom. I didn't need to invent a whole lot. She was larger than life. She had this kind of remarkable backstory of coming from South Africa and being involved in a democratic freedom struggle, and then coming to America and having this whole other life. And we had a lot of conflict, and so I started writing about her as a way of making sense of our relationship.
This was while she was still alive.
Yes. So not all of that made its way into the novel, but those were the first roots of the book. Me thinking about her, about our relationship, and also about some of the themes of inheritance and immigration. And some of that writing made its way into the novel. She got sick. She was diagnosed with cancer in 2010. Then her health kind of took a turn in early 2012. I moved home to care for her. I started to journal again through that experience and collect like little quotes and images and things that spoke to me and helped me. And all of those things eventually became the novel. But when I started working on those things, I didn't intend for them to be a novel. I was just writing my way through it. But at a certain point, it kind of cannibalized my focus. And I knew that that was the book that I needed to write. And I started looking back on those fragments because there was just a lot of truth in them. And I started to kind of fictionalize that story and create characters. But that's sort of where it came from.
And so now let's talk about freedom. How does freedom fit into the whole story, or what can we expect from freedom?
Yeah, so
it's a good question, isn't it? What can we expect from freedom?
Yeah. In this world today.
Oh my God, let's not even.
Yeah.
Let's keep talking about our moms.
So, Freedom is a collection of essays that I wrote at different times over the past almost 15 years now. And the title essay, I started right after I finished What We Lose. And the topic of that essay is a trip that I took to South Africa, to Johannesburg, which is my mother's birthplace, for a tombstone unveiling ceremony, which usually takes place a year after someone has passed away. It was my first time at home with my family, with my mother's family, since she had died. And when I arrived there, this was in the fall of 2013. On my first full day in the country, I woke to the news that Nelson Mandela had passed away unexpectedly. So there was this sort of coincidence of the passing and the mourning of Mandela. and this personal experience of mourning my mother. So I tried to kind of capture both of those things in that essay and to draw parallels between both of them. And the reason the essay is called Freedom is because I'm sort of meditating on the freedom of adulthood and the freedom that I was just beginning to experience of in the aftermath of my mother's death. And, this is probably something you can connect to also. And, also having a larger than life mother figure when that figure has passed on, regardless of the grief that you feel, there is this feeling of independence that happens. And what I tried to capture was, both of the positive and the negative of that experience. And then in the case of political freedom, and sort of embodied in Nelson Mandela's death, South Africa was going through this period about 20 years on from its independence of really deciding who they are as a country in this new phase. And Mandela's death really kind of sealed that independence and post-independence chapter. So that essay was an attempt to think through both of those things in nonfiction.
Thank you. Let's jump to mom. Let's talk about mom. So I'm learning from your books that mom's name is Dorothy. And she was born in 1957, one of 5 children in South Africa. Will you take it from there and tell me a little bit about her life so that we can then talk about the lessons you've learned from her and try to understand the connection?
Yeah, thank you. It was a really strange experience writing an essay collection and talking about her in print as Dorothy, because I had sort of written about her, this like fictionalized version of her in What We Lose. And it was based on her, but she was a very different person. And so, being able to like actually talk about who she was in Freedom was different. And I hope she wouldn't object too much to what I wrote. I tried to be honest, but there are also parts of her that I was very proud of. So Dorothy, as I said, she lived the first half of her life in South Africa. She was born into a family that lived under apartheid, and that was relocated under apartheid law from their home in Johannesburg, and were forced to move into a segregated area.
Can you explain why to my listeners who don't know about this? Let's enlighten people.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I was unsure how much of the political history you'd like me to go into, but so South Africa for many years was basically colonized by a white minority. At first, it was colonized by the British. A war was fought, and then basically the Afrikaners, which is sort of Dutch ethnicity that had come and settled, kind of took over, and there were, a coalition with other white minorities to kind of settle and contain the Black and colored populations of South Africa. And one of the ways that they did this was by forced relocations. This is what we have come to know as apartheid. Apartheid means to keep separate. So based on your racial and ethnic group and tribe, you were made to live in a prescribed area. There were all kinds of rules and codes of behavior, different times over a period of several decades. You had to carry a pass with you if you were not white. It dictated where you could go, what you could do. One of the stories that I have heard from my family is that so my family was colored, which means mixed race. And there was a pencil test that they had to take, which meant if you put a pencil into your hair and it stuck there, then you were black because your hair is kinky. And if the pencil fell out, that meant that you were colored and you would live in a colored area and go to a colored school because your hair was straighter. And this is the system that my mother lived under. My mother was a restless spirit. She was a free spirit. And, much like me, she hated injustice, and she was really animated by this fight and the struggle against what was happening in her country. A lot of it I didn't find out until after she had passed away. Yeah, I didn't know the extent of her involvement. So one of the stories that I tell in the book that my dad just, kind of happened, as often happens, your parents will just drop extremely important information into casual conversation. But he said my mother moved to the States after they met to live with him. And when they were in their green card interview, the interviewer just happened to mention that my mother was on Interpol because she was a highly wanted student activist. And those days aren't these days. So unfortunately, that didn't stop the process. She was still granted a green card. But I hadn't known that until a few years ago. Another thing they hadn't told me is that so my parents met in Botswana when my mom was meeting with some of her friends who were involved in activism, and she was actually getting some literature that she was going to smuggle into South Africa that was banned. My dad was there volunteering. They just happened to meet in a nightclub, and after that, my dad came back to the States, and they kept in touch. And I learned this only a few years after she passed away, that her father had actually called my father and begged him to let my mom come to the States and live with him because my grandfather was so afraid that she was going to get herself killed because of her political involvement. Again, these are things they hadn't told me. My mom, after she came to the States, she really suffered quite a lot of alienation, cultural dislocation, and she really missed South Africa. And so a lot of those sort of revolutionary impulses sort of went away, but a way that she channeled a lot of that activism was into her job. She was an educator in the school district of Philadelphia, which is a very large inner city school system. And there are a lot of underprivileged, a lot of Black and Latino children there. And she was very, very active as a classroom teacher and later as an administrator, very committed to educating these children who didn't have opportunities, oftentimes didn't have kind of basic necessities. And so that was the mother that I knew. That was the kind of daily struggle that I knew her to be engaged in. And I didn't always understand when I was growing up the political significance of what she was doing. And only years on was I able to recognize it and recognize, the kind of continuity between that it represented between her as a young person being politically active and later on in life being so committed to this work.
But Zinzi, did I understand from the book, did I understand this correctly, or am I projecting your mom? No, my mom to yours. Because my mom was also a big 1968 generation feminist and very rebellious against the system and so on, but which later left her. Not completely, but she very much calmed down. She didn't stay that way forever. Is this what you would say for your mom as well?
Yeah, that's true. You know, it's complicated. And
Yeah,
yeah, she definitely became more conservative in a lot of ways.
exactly. Do you think what I'm guessing with my mom, and I just talked to a friend about this today. I'm afraid there was a little bit of disillusionment there.
Mm,
The disillusionment that can happen with age and experience and trying to change things and seeing that sometimes it's a little bit too much out of our control.
absolutely. I mean, I live in Northern California. You know, I'm surrounded by a lot of activists, and I love it here. People who have remained committed, for them, it's also a struggle. And, you know, our mother's stories, I think, are very common. But I also think that that part doesn't tend to go away. I think it stays there. Yeah.
And also, may I say so, it gets passed on
Hmm.
because you did, I did. I inherited this critical and daring view of the world from
Hmm.
her, and the guts to say it and to show it and to communicate it, which I'm very grateful for. So I think it gets passed on, and hopefully we'll pass it on to our children as well.
Yeah, you know, this is this idea of inheritance, right? That's what the idea of studying motherhood is about, is
Mm.
what's passed on to us, how it changes. For me, a lot of it is the kind of conflicts that it engenders. Something that I wrote about in both books is how my mom saw that rebelliousness in me and tried to, I believe, tried to shield me from some of the difficulty that she experienced by, you know, being very critical and
Mm-hmm.
just trying to put me on a different path.
Mm-hmm. Which you can't do by force.
That tends to
No,
backfire
exactly.
very badly.
Zinzi, let's talk about lessons. Did you
Mm.
think about which the most important things you've learned from her that you could maybe share with us?
Well, I now have a son who's almost 3 years old, and it's been the biggest lesson. He himself has been the biggest lesson of my life. You know, none of us are prepared for motherhood.
Mm,
I think I was particularly naive in certain ways. My mother taught me a lot of lessons that show up in my daily life about how to make a child feel loved. Before I had him, that sort of caretaking impulse, I utilized it in my profession as a teacher, as a professor, and I have done that for over a decade now. And I think constantly about the commitment that she had to her students, the commitment to equality and justice, and how important that is in the classroom, and how that kind of translates to how that manifests in all other areas of your student's life and into society as a whole, and how what you do in a classroom is just this incredibly important act. And I learned that from her.
I'm very intrigued, but a little confused between the son
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and classroom, between the role of a mother and the teacher or professor. Can you
Mm-hmm.
elaborate on that or clarify that for me so I understand exactly? Is this about caretaking in a personal, loving mother to son way? Or is this passing on your knowledge, experience, and changing the world through your students?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you see that as a one thing?
yeah, I should not assume that everyone has the same sort of point of view. I was never someone who like always wanted to have a child, and for a while I didn't think that I would because I was, really kind of singularly focused on my career, and my mind started to change when I started teaching because I was able to care for students, and I think before I had that experience, I didn't think that I could. I didn't know if I was up to the task of helping someone and nurturing them. And of course, I've failed many times. um, but when I got into the classroom and I started to do it for a few years, it really brought out this mothering impulse in me. And you're right to intervene here. They're not one and the same. And your students are not your children. And, it's important to have boundaries in the classroom, et cetera. But there is this part of you when you're a good teacher that is able to kind of cast aside your own ego in order to care for someone else. And that's what really came out of me, that kind of nurturing, that kind of caretaking. It was really stoked in the classroom, and it made me see that I could do that for a child of my own. So for me, there was kind of a straight line between those two things.
Now I understand. Thank you,
Yeah.
Zinzi. It's fascinating. So you've seen this from her and experienced it as a daughter, but also witnessed it as somebody who worked with students. Would we say caretaking in general and nourishing, passing things on?
Yeah.
Nurturing, not nourishing. Nurturing is the word I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say nurturing and service. Those two things are very connected.
Yeah.
And those are things that she showed me. The kind of sacrifice that you make in order to care for someone else, the selflessness, egolessness. Obviously, she wasn't always that way, but I was able to see it.
Do you think she had a balance? Did she manage to take care of herself as well? Or was she one of these people who just gave and gave and gave, maybe sacrificed too much?
That's a great question. No, it wasn't balanced.
Zinzi, I'm slowly learning. After 9 years of this podcast, no, I'm lying. 6 years, 190 episodes. Oh my God, it sounds like it's all about this, about nurturing, taking care, self-sacrifice. And how the hell do we find the balance? And can we do it at all as women? I'm laughing because it's such a big topic.
Absolutely. It's the daily struggle. And another thing that I learned after her death is how much she struggled with depression.
Oh, really? How did you learn that after her death?
So it was a combination of adult perspective, realizing that, some of the things that I observed with her while I was a child were symptoms of depression. When I was older, I think my father was able to talk about it a little bit more objectively. And then finally, I had a really, interesting experience where my father, this was about 5 years ago now, gave me all of the letters that they had written to each other,
Wow.
which he'd saved. So these were letters that they'd sent while she was still in South Africa and he was in the States. And I was able to, kind of hear from her as it happened, what her life was like when she was 20 years old, living in South Africa. And something that came up a lot in those letters was she slept a lot. That was something that I noticed when I was a child. Again, didn't realize that it was a symptom. But some of the things that came up over and over were just, I was able to just see quite clearly, like this is what it was.
Do you think so she did not deal with it? Did she have any kind of help, or did she go take a medication, or
Yeah, I know. I know that she saw a counselor at least for a brief time after her best friend passed away. So that was always something that she talked about a lot with us as children because her friend had died in a car accident and it made her very afraid to drive. So
Mm,
the entire time she was alive, she never drove on the highway. And she was very anxious always.
hmm
That was very present in our daily
hmm
lives. And, I recognized later on that that was a result of all of the things that she had been through.
Zinzi, do you have other lessons, or can I ask you about things that I wrote out from your books, notes I took from your books as lessons?
I don't think I have other lessons. That's it.
I have written a few things, and now you can tell me this is not my mom, this is the fictional person, or yes or no, or we can talk about it. I wrote down she embodied feminism, although she never spoke of it.
Yes, that's her.
So, can we say, do you think that was one of the lessons for you?
Yes. Feminine power. and,
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
wrote, she taught me to demand respect in relationships.
Yes, that was her.
Look, I have lessons for you. I have your mom
Yes.
lessons for you, Cincy.
You're right. There are more lessons than I thought of.
Do you want to tell me
Absolutely.
about this? Because this respect is so important and we
Mm,
never talk about it. 190 interviews. I never heard respect. Can you believe
mm,
that? And
mm.
I'm as I'm preparing to turn this podcast into a book, I was thinking about how much it hurts me that respect was never mentioned.
Yeah, it's so important.
How did she teach you that? Or did you see that she demanded respect? Or did she tell you, listen, the way this person is treating you is not, did she model it or did she tell you?
It was both. I always saw that in her interactions with anyone, male, female, it didn't matter, that she didn't settle for poor treatment, that she had boundaries in relationships,
Oh, wow. That's
and
rare.
it is rare. And if someone didn't treat her well, she would either tell them. She was very assertive. She wasn't afraid to speak up for herself. And if that didn't work, she would leave a bad situation.
Also, with your father, did she have healthy boundaries with him?
You know, they had a very long
Mm.
marriage.
Yeah.
They went through a lot. But I think the way that they modeled their relationship is something that really helped me seek healthy
Yeah.
relationships on my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that helped me a
Yeah.
lot in adulthood to not get into situations where I would be treated poorly. Of course, I've had my own struggles as well, but I always recognized, even while she was alive, that I knew for the most part what love looked like, and respect was part of that.
Yeah. Thank you
So,
for saying that.
yeah.
And please tell me if this is from the character from the first book or if this is Mama Dorothy. A mother needs a secret stash so she can get away. Because this is definitely something my mom has taught me.
That would be
And I love her
Dorothy.
for that. That will be Dorothy. Okay. Did she tell you that? Or
Yes,
did she tell you that or did she model? She did tell you that. That's like my mom. My
both.
mom is like a woman. My mom insisted a woman needs to own her home, no matter in what shape and form, even if it's one
Mhm,
little studio somewhere. She's
mhm,
like, you need to have a home somewhere that's only yours.
mhm, mhm,
Where, as I read in the book, you can, if things turn for the worse, you always have
mhm,
a place to go.
mhm. absolutely. And that, goes back to the idea of respect in relationships. If
Okay.
someone's treating you properly, you have the means to extract yourself. Right. It's a very important lesson.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you have more lessons, or can we turn to our last question, which is the tricky question of what was something important that she was not able or just didn't teach you? An important lesson you learned yourself.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my mom passed away before my son was born. And there have been absences that have been felt since in the past 15 years, various kinds of absences, but that one is the most difficult. Everything from little practical lessons of how do you change a baby? How do you bathe them? Little things that I would have just liked to hear from her, to the more important lessons of how do you care for a child emotionally, especially at that age. At certain moments, I really long for her input on how to be a mother, something that I definitely miss.
You were very young when she passed away. You were 27 or so?
Yeah. Yeah.
Zinzi, I have a feeling we covered it all. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think so. Just, thank you for giving me the space to talk about my mother and, to think back on who she was along with you. It's been a nice experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your beautiful books again. And thank you for sharing her with me and my listeners.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyoumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.